All right, guys, in today's video, we are going to be having a very interesting discussion about the Xbox Series S, and we're going to be asking the question, is this console, this next-gen console, going to hold back the Xbox Series X as well as the PS5? And yes, this does directly tie into the PS5 when we are talking about third-party multi-platform games, specifically those games that will eventually be designed to be next-gen only titles. Now, we have a very interesting interview with a developer that I came across, and I certainly wanted to take some time to talk about this with you. I feel like this is a conversation that has kind of taken a back seat, understandably so. There was a lot of heated discussion regarding this topic when the Series S was first announced, but that conversation seems to have just kind of went away. I think the reason for that is because we're all becoming aware of the unfortunate reality that next gen, in the way we kind of think of it, isn't really going to kick off for a little while. These consoles are still hard to come by. They're going to be difficult to get and acquire for a little while now, and it's going to be some time before developers and publishers feel completely comfortable in making their games next gen only. I do hope we end up seeing that sooner rather than later, but that's just the way it is. But that day will come, and I have to assume that at least by 2022 we'll see these next gen consoles fully embraced. And yes, the Series S is part of that. So the game we're talking about is called the Rift Breaker. Now, I'm not familiar with this game. It is an indie game, and apparently it's using a pretty powerful engine, and this engine is utilizing several DirectX 12 Ultimate features. Pay attention to the word features, such as ray traced shadows, ray traced ambient occlusion, and variable rate shading. And WCCF Tech did an interview recently with the COO at Exor Studios. This is the name of the studio developing the game, and they asked this developer what working with the Series S hardware is like and how it's going to affect next-gen games as a whole. And let's go over what he had to say. So the developer answered with, yes, the Xbox Series S requires additional optimization. While we were able to simply compile the Rift Breaker for the Xbox Series X, and it just works, the Xbox Series S requires additional optimization still. It doesn't look like it will require that much work to be running well at 1080p on the Xbox Series S. The best thing about the current architecture is that the CPU power on both Xbox models is practically the same. Scaling graphical effects is a lot easier than scaling gameplay. The amount of available memory is a determining factor in a lot of cases when we talk about the size of a game world or about how many things can be happening within it at any given time. The size of the memory that is available in the Xbox Series S is the actual determining point for the entire console generation, as gameplay features have to be fitted to the lowest specification. From the point of view of a developer, it would be much easier if there was a single Xbox Series X SKU, but given the circumstances, I think that Microsoft has made good choices in how to create a much cheaper console that can still run next-generation games. So, yeah, I do mostly agree with what he's saying here at the end. I mean, he's basically saying that given the situation the world is in, it is totally understandable why Microsoft is saying, let's see if we can make a more affordable console. I get that. I'm not denying that it's nice for people to be able to gain access to next gen at a cheaper price point. But as somebody who is really excited for the future of game development and what we can see done to innovate in game design, the Series S makes me extremely nervous and hesitant. And we have seen multiple developers express concern about the Series S, specifically about the memory and the memory bandwidth. This seems to be the biggest bottleneck within the Series S. And, you know, based off of what this specific developer is saying, I think he's making it clear without trying to completely throw Microsoft under the bus that the Series S effectively is going to hold back gameplay design to a certain extent. And I think it's only going to get worse as time goes on. I feel like another reason people haven't really been paying too much attention to the Series S is because gameplay design as of right now has not really seen any type of major paradigm shift, although it's likely we will see a major paradigm shift in the next couple of years. And when that paradigm shift does happen, regardless of how easy the Series S is to develop for, it still only has a certain amount of memory here to work with. That's going to ultimately affect, as this developer says, the size of game worlds and the amount of things that can be happening at any given time within that game world. Now, maybe some people don't care about that, but I do, because when I imagine, let's just say Rockstar Games, they're developing Grand Theft Auto 6 right now, presumably, and they're known to really kind of push the industry forward in a big way. They're known to really be able to just do things that are just kind of mind blowing and push technology to its limits. Imagining what Rockstar Games could do with a game like Grand Theft Auto 6 on just the PS5 and the Series X is kind of amazing and exciting to think about. But then when you factor in the Series S, then you might get a little bit concerned, right? Because that is a console that has significantly less memory than the Series X. And therefore, when you hear a developer like this developer right here saying that, the size of available memory, or the amount specifically of available memory, is a determining factor in a lot of cases when we talk about the size of a game world and how many things can be happening, it's a little bit concerning, right? It's a little bit concerning because we could very well be looking at a situation where we have to see GTA 6 potentially downscaled to some extent. What extent, we may never know, but to some extent, thanks to the Series S. And this doesn't just apply to a third-party game like GTA 6. This applies to all third-party games that will eventually be next-gen only. And the problem I see here is that this is a mandate by Microsoft. Microsoft is not going to allow, as of right now, developers and studios to decide, we're just going to make our game for the Series X and high-end PCs, basically. They can't do that. They have to, in order to get their game published on the Xbox platform, make sure their game can run properly on the Series S console. Now, he does point out the CPU, and yes, there's a lot of things inside of the Series S that qualified as a next-gen console, but this developer specifically acknowledges the fact that it's a lot easier to scale graphical effects, and that's what we need to understand here. A lot of people, I think, don't understand, and it's kind of understandable why they wouldn't get it fully, because of the way a lot of Xbox fans talk about it. It's all about scalability. Scalability this, scalability that. Now, I'm not a developer, but what this developer is making clear is that, yes, scaling graphical effects and graphical features are a lot easier. It's a lot easier than it is, say, scaling gameplay. This is why I've always said that I feel like Sony was really trying to do something special with the PS5, because when you listen to Mark Cerny talk, when you listen to the engineering that went into the PS5, everybody makes fun of the SSD and whatnot, and they wonder why it has less T-flops. It's because that's not what this is about. This isn't just a pure raw power situation. This is about changing game design. And game design, as I said earlier, is going to change. There's going to potentially be a massive shift in the way that developers approach game design, thanks to these next-gen consoles and thanks to the technology that is, advancing and being put into these consoles, as well as the tech that, a lot of PC enthusiasts are buying as well. And that's really what's going to do it. And and I get it, like a lot of games, yes, they are going to be scaled back. If the Series S wasn't a thing, a lot of these games would still be scaled back by PC, but still, developers would at least have the option to say, well, we're still going to release this game on PC, but we kind of want to only make it higher end PCs, right? Like, we're going to kind of leave out all the mid and low tier PCs. But even then, I think, going back to Rockstar Games, they're another example of, they kind of just work on the consoles first, and they make sure that they can really just kind of max out the consoles. And then after that, they focus on PC development, and then they can kind of worry about fully optimizing for all of the different specs. And they'll know by that point, like, okay, we just can't have this game run on this set of specifications, because that's not how the game was designed. So the reason I'm highlighting this is because I think it's important that we still kind of have this conversation because if you want my opinion, I think that as we go further into this generation, I think we're going to see the Xbox Series S become more and more of a thorn in the side of next gen games. I really do believe that. I mean, there are already examples that we can see thanks to Digital Foundry and other outlets kind of testing these games where the Series S is just like, whoa, like that's not that great, But whether or not the Series S is going to really be able to hold up, I don't know. What I can say is, as a PlayStation 5 owner, I am very excited and very much looking forward to the day when most third-party publishers are embracing these next-gen consoles only, and developers don't have to worry about tethering their games to old architecture with the PS4 and the Xbox One. But then I'm going to have to worry about the Series S. Granted, the S is significantly more powerful than these older consoles, but at least with cross-gen, there's like a cutoff point. You see what I'm saying? What happens 4, 5, 6, 7 years from now into this generation when the PS4 and Xbox One were left behind a long time ago, but now the Series S is basically taking their place as the lowest common denominator, and it starts to present itself as a severe bottleneck. I can only hope that if that were to happen, I can only hope that that Microsoft will allow developers to choose, right? Like if you're having trouble optimizing your game and getting it running, like, you basically have to completely change the game design in order to get it to run on the Series S, then fine. You don't have to release it on the Series S. You can just release it on the PS5 and Series X. I hope that's something Microsoft will allow in the future. Again, I don't think that's a problem that has presented itself yet. I don't think it will present itself in the next year, maybe not even in the next 2 years, but I do believe at some point that problem is going to present itself. I mean, I have to imagine that there are already developers working on next-gen only games, and if they are, I have to imagine that they could potentially already be running into these problems. We won't really know because, these companies, they have to kind of abide by these mandates, but we're going to find out again as we go further into this generation if the Series S proves to be a serious problem. It concerns me, honestly. This isn't me wanting to just, trash talk Xbox. It's really not that. I feel like if you're an Xbox Series X owner in particular, you also want to be a little bit concerned by this, although maybe not so much, because if you already bought into the Xbox ecosystem, then you already know that everything is basically that Microsoft produces basically going everywhere already. But, this is why I've always made such a big deal out of PlayStation 5 exclusives, because that's where we're really going to see, down the line, what is this hardware truly capable of doing? That's where we're going to see it. But I would also like to see third-party games pushed as far as they can go as well, because a lot of the greatest games I've ever played were third-party multi-platform titles, and some of the most talented studios and developers, are third-party, and they make games for both PlayStation and Xbox. So anyway, yeah, I thought that this developer just kind of summed it up pretty well. He's basically saying that, look, scaling graphical effects such as ray tracing and stuff like that, scaling it up and down, it's pretty easy and it's not a lot of extra work. But when you talk about scaling gameplay, in a lot of cases, that's just something that can't happen. Look at Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. There's a lot of people who look at that game and they just laugh and they say, oh yeah, that game could definitely run on a PS4. No, it couldn't. It just simply couldn't. If it were to run on a PS4, that would require a significant amount of work to be done to find some serious workarounds, or just kind of tearing down the gameplay design and rebuilding it to build it around that lowest common denominator. So that's the kind of stuff I don't want to see happen. Anyway, guys, that does it for the video. It turned out longer than I wanted it to, but I did find this very interesting. I'm going to ask you to leave your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think about what this developer's saying about the Series S? Leave the video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.